Hi all, my name is Jonathan. I am the communications manager with Friends of Sabeel North America. We are a Christian voice for Palestine. Now, we're here today to talk about the Facebook We Need to Talk campaign, which is telling Facebook not to add the word Zionist to its hate speech policy. FOSNA is one of the co-sponsors of this campaign because we see how this policy could potentially harm our work and challenge our work of challenging Christian Zionism, as well as harm our Palestinian partners. And we'll get into that just a second, but I do want to open up our time by acknowledging that, at least for all of us living in the United States, that we are on occupied native lands. I am calling today from occupied Onondaga land. They are part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and this is their unceded territory. As people that are doing decolonial work, it's important for us to acknowledge that being a US-based organization, we are also settlers on native land. And like I said, this campaign, the Facebook We Need to Talk campaign, is challenging Facebook's new policy that wants to add the word Zionist to its hate speech understanding. So we have Rabbi Alyssa Wise here with us today. She is the Deputy Director of Jewish Voice for Peace and is one of the main, JVP is one of the main organizers behind the campaign. So Rabbi Alyssa, I'm wondering if you could tell us why JVP sees this as an important and strategic fight at this time.
Great, thank you, Jonathan, and thank you to FOSNA for organizing this event and joining with us in this really important campaign. So Facebook is considering giving into the Israeli government's demand that Zionist be widely accepted as synonymous with Jew. And this is not acceptable for many reasons, which I'll go into. So we got word of their plans to do this in November 2020. So it's important to know they haven't done it yet, right? And that's why we've launched this campaign, is because we really want to push them not to make this policy change. So in November, when we got word, we knew we had to act fast, as it sounded like Facebook's executives were saying that they wanted to make a decision in February, right? So this month. So that just gave us a few months to launch a challenge big enough to Facebook to get them to refuse to hand a significant victory to those that support Israeli apartheid at the expense of Jewish safety. So this effort, it's important to know, is part of a controversial definition of anti-Semitism, an International Holocaust Remembrance Association, IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And this definition is currently being touted by the Israeli government and its supporters in an effort to shield themselves from accountability. So there's this coordinated effort led by the Israeli government and backed by their many non-governmental and nonprofit and other supporters. And though Facebook is claiming that this move is not part of the IHRA, and it's not them adopting the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, that what they're considering is narrower in scope, Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg, to whom we're directing our campaign efforts and the petition that now has 52,000 signatures on it that we're going to be virtually delivering to her on Wednesday. So she is on record having written to Adam Milstein, whose name you might recognize as a notorious billionaire Islamophobe and a leading proponent of the IHRA definition. And he's a right-wing donor who is so extreme that even AIPAC distanced itself from him. So she wrote to him saying that the IHRA has guided Facebook's approach and that their policy goes, quote, even further than the IHRA definition. And so now Facebook is considering amending its hate speech policy to adopt Zionist as a proxy for Jew or Israeli, and therefore blocking conversations, much like the one that we're having right now, about a political ideology and identity that has real-world implications for Palestinians, for Israelis, for Jewish people and Palestinian people all over the world. So if they would make this move, valid attempts, important attempts to hold the Israel accountable through constitutionally protected political speech could be labeled as hate speech and removed from the platform. Palestinians would be prevented from using Facebook like everyone else to talk about their daily experiences and their histories and their lives, because their realities are shaped by Zionist apartheid policy. So when they share their perspectives, they're using the word Zionist because that's who is enacting these policies against them. This policy would censor Palestinian speech and discriminate against Palestinians as a class and silence nuanced conversation about Zionism. And as I wrote last week in The Guardian, the discriminatory implications for Palestinians are more than reason enough to reject this policy, but there's actually another important reason to denounce it that I want to raise here. To conflate Zionism with all Jews, many of whom, like myself, are anti-Zionists, is a very harmful assumption because it's premised on the anti-Semitic notion that Jews are uniform in our beliefs and political commitments. Even worse, it suggests that all Jews in America and elsewhere around the world are fundamentally loyal to a foreign government and that the real home for all Jews is Israel, playing into the vile notion that we are unable to fully become part of the societies we inhabit, that we do not truly belong in our home countries and communities. And of course, as this conversation is highlighting, not only are all Jews not Zionists, not all Zionists are Jews. There are at least 10 million Christian Zionists in the US who believe that Israel's occupation of Palestinian land will hasten the second coming of Christ, at which point Jews must convert to Christianity or die. There's hardly a more anti-Semitic notion than that. And that's why I'm so encouraged that FOSNA has taken on challenging Christians United for Israel in recent years and working to ensure that Christian Zionist support for Israel is no longer invisible, because that itself can play into anti-Semitism. So for us at JVP, we're here for fights like this one, right? That's why JVP exists. As are all the now, there's 49 campaign partners across the globe, part of this campaign. As allies to Palestinians, as they organize toward their freedom, we're here to clear obstacles, to ensure Palestinians have all the tools and platforms available they need to organize for their freedom. We're here to decouple Jewishness and support for Israel, and this campaign represents a chance to move forward on both those goals. So far, and in summary, where we are in our campaign, we gave ourselves 4 weeks to gather 25,000 signatures on our petition to Facebook, and we reached that goal in just 4 days. We've now are close to 52,000 signatures. This petition is a tool for educating people on the issue, bringing in new supporters, building relationships with new partners, as we've been able to do, and of course, pressuring Facebook to make this policy change. And everything we're building in this campaign will set us up for whatever the fights are that come our way nationally, locally, globally in the months and years to come. That's why campaigns are so critical to our movements, is because they build energy and momentum far beyond their lifespan. So it's imperative that we dismantle anti-Semitism in all of its manifestations, but conflating Zionism with the Jewish people only entrenches it. Facebook should not allow governments to blur the lines between hate speech and political speech. Facebook, don't do it.
Thanks, Rabbi Allison. Really appreciate that you bringing that in, and particularly what you said about Christian Zionism. And just to elaborate on that a little bit, FOSNA's work of countering Christian Zionism has been a key aspect of what we do for these past couple of years, particularly challenging and countering the organization Christians United for Israel. And what we've found in our research is, your estimate of 10 million Christian Zionists in the US is a very low estimate of how many there are. There are definitely more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists. And as you said, they hold not only anti-Semitic ideas, but also extremely anti-Palestinian and anti-Muslim beliefs as well. And so what I think about when I think about this policy is that our work of challenging Christian Zionism and Christian Zionists could actually be hindered as well. Actually us trying to challenge the hateful ideologies could be hindered by this this policy by Facebook. And so it really flies in the face of what Facebook is claiming, right? And I think you laid that out really well. So there is that question of, so what's this really about then, right? And I think it's pretty obvious that this is in a long line of silencing Palestinian voices, right? So in the rest of our time, I really want to raise up two particular Palestinian voices of Carmel Abu Ziad, who's a law student in Dallas and a member of the Palestinian Youth Movement, as well as Noor Oda, who is actually in Palestine and is a media professional and consultant. She's a political analyst and a social activist who focuses on freedoms and civil rights. So turning it over to you two, Carmel, I'll ask you the first question here. How have you seen the silencing of Palestinians in the US context, and how has PYM and other work that you do been challenging that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan. Thanks so much for having me on the call today. I mean, just as a quick example, I know I work a lot with the Palestinian Youth Movement on the social media aspect of things, and we've had several posts taken down because it doesn't meet community standards, right? And so just an example of that is we posted a photo of a Palestinian kid during the second intifada with a slingshot, and that was taken down for violating the community standards. So after that happened, I went to go look at different Zionist pages, and I came across the IDF page, and there are posts with IDF soldiers pointing guns at the camera and having photo shoots with AK-47s, but that somehow meets the community guidelines of Facebook. And so I think that this is just an example of how there's an erasure of the power dynamics, and there's not an understanding of, you know, the difference between the colonizer and the colonized, the occupier and the occupied, and only state violence is being justified in the media, on social media networks and things like that. And so I think this is really a testament, like these tactics that they're resorting to, these tactics to silence us, are really just a reflection of how our work is effective, and how we have to continue, and how we have to continue to push our narrative, and not back down with what like political message we're trying to bring forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And Noor, I have a similar question for you. How have you seen Facebook's policy affecting Palestinians? And what does the resistance in Palestine look like to this?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be part of this conversation, and this is a development that will affect each and every one of us. Each and every one of us who was hopeful that social media would help elevate a narrative that is repressed by the mainstream, repressed by big money, and for a while that worked. And I think once the players who kept Palestinian voices out of the mainstream conversation for so many decades realized how potent it's become to just know the facts, to interact, and to have that honest and transparent conversation. This trend of suppressing, of censoring, of silencing Palestinian voices started and reaching to the point where now the word Zionism will become taboo. And I think we have to go back a little bit to understand maybe where the roots of all of this is. And I believe that the roots of this trend is racism. It's the fact that Palestinians are not allowed to be seen as humans of equal worth, as people who have rights that are being suppressed and that are being violated in ways that nobody would tolerate, at least nobody who can be consistent with themselves as saying that, they are for human rights and for human dignity. And so the fact that this conversation has become wide open on social media is troubling to those racists who want to maintain the status quo of generalization, of dehumanizing Palestinians, of the preconceived notions and the stereotypes of the angry Arab, of the angry Palestinian, of the violent Palestinian, that, we're somehow innately violent. We as mothers don't love our children as much. We, spend our days and nights thinking of how we can hurt the Israelis. We hate all Jews, etc., etc., etc. The fact that we're in this panel is very troublesome, right? To those who want to cancel the conversation on Zionism and Christian Zionism, because it shows that the problem is not religion, it's not Judaism, it's not the Jews, it's the fact that Palestinians are oppressed, they're denied their basic rights, and that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable, period. And the fact that Israel claims to be the representing all Jews and claims so falsely does not diminish from our right to hold it accountable for those crimes, as evident in, the solidarity campaigns and all the work that is being done all around the world to hold Israel accountable for its actions. And so this targeting, let's say, of Palestinian voices and of Palestinian narrative reaches Palestinians in different ways. And I know a lot of journalists have been called for interrogation by Israel about certain posts that they've done. They've been blocked. I know several of my friends who are still in the field. I come from a journalism background. They were blocked for sometimes weeks, sometimes months from Facebook because they transmitted live home demolitions or incursions into Palestinian cities and so on and so forth. They weren't expressing opinions. They were simply transmitting live what was actually happening. And to Facebook, that was simply too much. Do we try to get around it? Of course we do. And to paraphrase Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, if you want to fight injustice, you have to be an outlaw. So, by all means, we will find ways to call things what they are in different ways. We will combine Arabic and English together as we do right now. But it gets to a bizarre point. The word martyr, for example, in Arabic, flags, all sorts of red lights for Facebook. Shaheed. What do you do if you have a shaheed every other day in Palestine? What do you call him? What do you call someone who was killed for no fault of their own, except that they're Palestinian, they're in a place where the Israeli army is operating? And you have to find a way around it. What do you call Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Fatah and the PFLP and all of those factions whose names are also red flags on Facebook? They're part of our daily life. They are the political actors. How do you name them without getting shut out of Facebook? And so on and so forth. And now with Zionism, the conversation will become all the more difficult. And that's why I think I can safely say we all really appreciate this campaign, because it will protect the little space that we're trying to keep. I mean, it is shrinking. It's shrinking all over. There's a lot of intimidation out there for not just Palestinian narratives, but pro-Palestine voices and organizations around the world. So it will go a long way to help push back against this trend that does not think that we should be given a chance to be at least seen, let alone to compart shared values and so on as we are doing right now.
Yeah, thanks for that. Your sharing reminded me of some of Edward Said's analysis. I remember him talking about how Palestinians have always been denied the permission to narrate, right? And we're seeing that so clearly with these policies. Yeah, and I also was just really struck by the fact that, like, Palestinians wanting to mourn the death of someone on Facebook are being censored, even to do that, right? That the words that we use for that are being censored is really terrible. I want to take a little bit of time to open it back up to just anyone that has reflections on what the others have said. If you have anything that you would like to share, please go ahead.
Well, I was, yeah, I think the point that you are just lifted up, Jonathan, of like, how do you mourn, right? And Noor, what you were raising. And I think like what that points to is that right now this campaign is narrowly focused on this policy decision that's not yet made, but it does point to that Facebook needs to reevaluate in general how their deal with Palestinians on the platform, right? And that's our hope is that this campaign, like, you know, part of the strategy as an organizer is like you focus in on one thing that is actually like a distillation of a larger problem, right? So hopefully we will be influential enough to stop Facebook from doing this and bring them to their senses around this. And at the same time, we know that, you know, the Israeli government is encouraging them to do this, ordering them to do this, right? And that inside of Facebook, right, the woman who's in charge of this content policy decision inside of Facebook, she herself was in the Likud government before she came to Facebook, right? So we know that there's something amiss, right, in the very foundation of how these content policies are applied, not just because we see right-wing nationalists have free reign, yet story after story of censorship within the Palestinian community. The priorities are just wrong. So you know, I am just reminded of that, right? Like, because you can't get really focused, like this is the most important thing. And at the same time, we win this, we push on this, and then we move on to the bigger fight. And that's kind of how it goes, right? And organizing and campaigning.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
Oh,
Carmen.
no, sorry. I was just going to say that just to build on something that Noor had mentioned, you know, if it was based on the merits of the argument, they know that they would lose. And so they have to resort to these tactics. And so it's really important that we don't water down the narrative. We stay true to our political message and our narrative and all of these things. And there's a way to be tactical without watering it down and compromising what our beliefs are and what we're trying to push forward. And so I think it's really important to like emphasize that what we're doing is right and effective, which is why they're resorting to these tactics.
Yeah, and that also made me think about like doing research on Kufi. I go to their Facebook page, and the comments that are on there, the stuff that's getting posted, the extreme anti-Arab racism, like that is just so overt. And bigotry in general that is so overt that's being allowed on the platform, while Palestinians can't even like share basic facts about our life. You know, that stark difference that kind of reflects the way that particularly conservative Christians can get away with a lot. And we saw that in the on January 6th, the white nationalists, a lot of them came, you know, some came with Israeli flags, and they tended not to be Jewish. They tended to be Christian Zionists that had that kind of symbology there. So just recognize the immense power that Christian Zionists have on U.S. policy, and the amount of privilege that they have on platforms like Facebook, to just show the disparity there. So that's why I again want to commend people. Sign the petition that JVP has going up. And on Wednesday is when they're finally going to deliver it. And there's going to be a whole shindig happening. Alyssa, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, it would be wonderful for you all to join us. So you could see, hopefully in the chat, there's a link to the registration. So at this virtual petition delivery event, we're going to be sending the message to Facebook loud and clear. We're going to be taking action together. So get virtual action to deliver the message. And we're going to hear from some artists. We're going to have some spoken word from Remy Kanazi. We're going to have music from the Trio Gibran. We're going to hear inspirational words from Noura Erakat and Judith Butler. And we're gonna, you know, ensure that all of us are ready for what comes next and ensure Facebook gets our message loud and clear. So we hope you'll join us. It's at 12 East on Wednesday.
Yeah, Faz is really excited about that as well. We have Faz and the people and other friends of Sabeel around the world are going to be participating in sending the petitions. And so we'll be posting about that on Wednesday as well. And we just commend everyone to go to that. And I want to end by really thanking all three of you. Thank you, Carmel, Noor, and Rabbi Alyssa. Really appreciate you all giving of your time, your expertise, and your stories. And we don't just take this as entertainment, right? We take this as a call to action. We must speak, tweet, post, write, act, protest to protect each other's rights. And so thank you so much for inspiring us to do that today. Goodbye.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Goodbye.